Hi, I'm the True Wise Gamer, giving off my vast knowledge so you may understand games a bit better. It is time to talk about the SMT series once again. And it's a weird series when I really start thinking about it. Shin Megami Tensei is a series that's been going on for 30 years with a strong metric ton of games under its belt. Not just counting the main game. I mean, like, there are more spin-off games sub-series than there are games in the main series, which is just weird to me. One of my favorite games from this franchise is actually one of the spin-offs as well, Digital Devil's Saga. It is by far one of my favorite games of all time. I really recommend it, and I really think you should play it. And sadly, while we're not talking about it, we will talk about it one day, because we're actually talking about one of the big games in the franchise, that being SMT Nocturne, which is considered by a lot of fans in the series to be the magnum opus of the series, the cream of the crop, as they say. And quite honestly, I want to challenge that assumption, if only slightly, since while I think the game is still good, its flaws are something that prevent me from calling it great. I mean, I like it more than 5 if that's anything, but honestly, speaking of 5, I did review on 5, and I think this video was kind of like a semi-sequel to that review, where I'll talk about things about that video and talk about them here too, so we're all clear. And no, I won't be like telling you to go watch it because for the most part, I'll just reference it and give you the context. It's mostly because the games kind of suffer from the same issue, but weirdly different and diverge, which we will get into. Well, let's actually talk about the game for a moment. So originally, they made the first 3 games, SMT 1, 2, and F. But after that, they were pretty much done with it. I mean, sure, they were gonna do side stuff, but otherwise, that was it. But it wasn't until the PS2 came around, and while testing some old demon designs, they said, why not? And I mean, like, that's sort of weird in a way, right? The main line of a series just stopping forever just to do side stuff with it. I mean, like, I don't know, that's just buck wild. That's like if Pokemon stopped at the second game and only did spin-off, like, forever. That's just insanity. In any case, they decided to actually make it more standalone rather than making it a sequel to 2, because let me tell you, being a sequel onto those games in particular is already a clusterfuck as hell, as I don't even want to wish that on my mortal enemy, Final Fantasy 13. Okay, I would, but I at least wouldn't do it to normal people. Which still kinda happen, but also this game would have a sequel that tied into the events of this game, maybe? I'm not sure, it's a little confusing. We'll talk about that when we get to that. I would go on, and I just thought that sort of information was really interesting. There are people out there who could do and talk about the game's development better than I could. People like Marsh, who actually hasn't done an SMT free video yet, which would be interesting, but let's hope someday. In fact, let's go into a few other SMT YouTubers who are actually really good and I would recommend very much so. Gnarly with his videos, a few challenges on the games which are interesting, and kind of the reason why I really wanted to try SMT free for the first time. Tony For You with his analysis videos on some of the demons in the series, which is really interesting. Nom's Compendiums, really interesting videos. They're really all good, and I recommend them all. Since we're also talking about SMT side stuff, Lady Virgilia? I don't know how to pronounce it properly. It's actually pretty good, and her videos really are really good. Like, they get into the complicated thought process of that. I'm sorry for going off topic. I just thought it would be interesting to kind of point you in that direction. Because honestly, their videos have actually kind of pushed me into actually making this one, where I want to talk about something near the end, about something that we need to kind of just maybe all address as fans of the series. But we will get into that in my review of Shin Megami Tensei 3 Nocturne HD Remaster. Sorry, I didn't know where to put this, but I am doing the remaster. So the game begins with naming ourselves and our friends, who are at the hospital to visit their teacher, who's been feeling a bit down. Why, we will get into in a bit. Also, voice acting. Yeah, this remaster actually added voice acting, which by and large is a weird call, but it's a cool thing in regard, because some people are dyslexic and having a voice can help them figure out what's going on. Plus, it can be funny with how the voice acting gets at times, but that's a whole other thing. In any case, back to the plot. Before you go to the hospital, you meet Hijiri, a journalist who's here trying to find out more information about a weird altercation that happened yesterday at a nearby park that ended in bloodshed. Yeah, and it starts to get even weirder. When you get to the hospital, no one's there. And when you try to go to the basement to try to find someone, you find a cold man named Hikawa, who after seeing you, sends Baphomet at you. But before he can kill you, your teacher comes in and tells him to cut it off and takes you to the roof. However, before you reach the roof, you find an old woman and a young boy, telling you that something's about to happen and they're interested in you. When you get to the roof, Yuko, just for the record, I will be referring to the characters as their official name, for the record. In any case, your teacher, Yuko, has decided to jumpstart the apocalypse, with the help of a cult that was run by Hikawa, one of the leaders of them. Essentially, she has given up on the world and it's just done, and wants to restart the world so that it could be brand new and actually worth living in. We will get back onto this, but more in a bit. She basically called you here so that you will survive and make a new world. How is this possible? It's because the hospital is protected. How is very unclear, but it doesn't really matter. After she's finished explaining what's going to happen, she says to find her in the new world, as the conception begins. Which actually knocks us out, and while we're knocked out, the child comes to us and says, in our state, we'll probably die because of how weak we are. However, he's willing to give us a gift in order to survive, and decides to give us a Magatama, a worm-like being that infects us, as we soon awake with tattoos on our body and are now a demi-fiend. You are now left to your own devices and must survive with your new powers, as the hospital is now full of demons, ready to kill you, because why not? And here's where the combat begins, and you better get a good grasp of how the combat works, because the game ain't gonna let you just go by on your own. No, you gotta learn how to do this combat correctly. So let's explain combat real quickly. Combat is a turn-based RPG with a minor change to make it its own thing. That being the press turn system, which would be used for the later games for better and for worse, more on that in a bit. So basically the game gives you a set amount of turns, depending on who's in your party, up to 4 turns, which you can do whatever you want on those turns. The game has an element system and a weakness system, meaning everyone has a strength and weakness. Like if you hit a foe with their weakness, you get a half turn. Though also for the record, you can also pass your turn to another character so that they can inflict a weakness onto somebody else, in case you don't have that demon in particular to do a weakness. You'll notice I said demons, cause yes, they're in the game. Soon enough you'll meet a fairy named Pixie, who will be a useful ally who will also teach you how to communicate to demons. See, in this series, demons can be conversated for a lot of things, like maybe getting some money, items, or more importantly, recruiting them to your side and helping you win battle. However, they aren't going to join you freely. You need to bribe them in order to join you. And how you bribe them is a bit hard, because let me elaborate. Demons are a bit unique to one another. Like, one demon might just immediately join you after a bit, or they might just leave. It really depends, so you gotta be careful on how you're negotiating with all demons. However, there are also just some demons that will just never be recruitable, and it is kind of annoying when the game doesn't give you a way to tell which demons can be or cannot be recruited. I mean, like, there's a list out there, but it's still annoying. However, there's also a sub-list of demons that are also recruitable, but also not recruitable, and require special conditions in order to recruit them. Cause yeah, this game gets weird at times. In fact, demons have a habit of talking to other demons if they're related in some way, which is actually kind of interesting, but not important. But now you're probably wondering, well, how the heck am I supposed to get those new types of demons? Well, unlike some other monster capturing series, this series requires you to sacrifice your demons in order to gain a new one altogether. After a while, you will gain access to something called the Cathedral of Shadows, where demons gather. Oh god, I can never do it right. he will basically unlock the ability for you to fuse demons from the party you find. And sadly, for the most part, you are better off just fusing new demons than recruiting them outright. That is mostly because you can impart a demon with a lot of new abilities that they just wouldn't normally have, like a jack-o'-lantern with Bufu or Sionga. It really does help make a demon more diverse and allows them to do more things that they normally wouldn't be able to do. And a normal demon on their own just isn't that good. Though speaking of skills, we need to talk about some sort of skill that I didn't really have a good place to put it. I could have put it earlier, but I felt like it would be better here. Essentially, I want to talk about conversation skills. These are basically skills that demons can learn to, well, negotiate with other demons. However, these abilities for the most part are useless. Like, I got some use out of them, but I don't see the real value of them for the most part. And really do just take up space for more useful abilities for the most part. And really, with all the options you have, there's a lot of possibilities you can get and so many cool demons to actually try to gather. However, some demons have weird requirements for them, or certain specific demons, which means you either have to find them again, or call them up in the compendium. This is where the compendium was first introduced, and it was for the best, because it basically allowed players to just, for a price, you can gain back demons from before, and, well, it's useful for fusion. However, when fusing demons, you also need to be careful because there can be accidents. Yeah, fusion accidents. These can be a weird incident because there's no real rhyme or reason of why they happen, they just happen. Though sometimes, while they can actually result in a lot of good things, they also can result in a lot of just, more to the most part, bad fusions. Which just means I had to use a lot of Maka just to gain back the old demon just to fuse the new demon that I actually wanted. However, gaining enough is a bit of a problem. We need to talk about one of the bigger problems with this game, the DLC areas. So, let me explain. These have become a staple after 4, where the publisher decided, how do I fuck up this game? And they decided by adding DLC areas that give bonus items that give either more XP or money, which can break the game in half. Though then again, this game isn't really that hard to begin with. Like, I'm not saying that SNT isn't that hard, like, not particularly. I mean, like, there's a curve, and like, once you know what the curve is, you'll be fine. Like, most normal foes are easy fodder and at worst, annoyances. The common foes just can't meet you as a threat, except if they're unknowns, which I'll dive into in a moment, or more likely, pop up and ambush you and hit you with a skill that can just insta-kill you. I will say the game is nice to give you an idea of when the next common battle will happen. However, like I just stated, ambushes can really mess you up because you don't know what's gonna happen and they might just be able to insta-kill you. Which, going off for a tangent for a moment, I'm glad insta-kill moves were mostly erased because they were just bad for the series in general. They don't help the series, it's just annoying. Insta-kill moves were always bullshit, in any game. I mean, like, I say all that stuff about how the insta-kill stuff can happen, like, that rarely happens. I mean, sure, it's annoying, but still. But let's actually get into why. This isn't a criticism per se, but just something that I think a lot of fans should note. I mentioned earlier about how you will deal with unknown foes, and how they can be a threat. Problem is, for the most part, I know all the demons like the back of my hand. And like I stated earlier, this isn't a criticism per se, but it's something we gotta admit. The roster has kind of been samey, right? Not saying the demons are bad, or badder in particular. I actually like the roster in this game in particular. It's just that it's been repeated a lot in the later game, so much so that I could just look at that demon and say, oh, that guy's weak to fire. Oh, this guy's weak to physical moves. You get the idea? It kind of becomes automatic in my mind where I just know what I need to do, and it just becomes this sort of thing where I just repeat what I'm going to do all the time. The tricks are known, so coming in drastically decreases the difficulty a lot. This is also very weird for me because, like I stated earlier, this is my first time playing through this game on my own. So when the challenges do come in, I'm like, okay, done. Like, I already know what I need to do. It's not badly designed, it's just, I'm not challenged. And I'm not saying like the game is just bad, I'm just noting something that I think as fans we should talk about. Like, I just feel as though the series could just try more different demons out, like give us a new fresh pool of demons, and not rehash the same demons over and over again. And again, I am more criticizing the series' just small pool, which just because of what I know from other games, causes me to just do it automatically. Which, to at least praise the game, I do think the dungeons are well designed enough. They have cool gimmicks to them, and the one I really did like was the White Temple, or the Colored Dungeon, where you had to fight this one boss that has a bunch of weaker units but are elementally weak, while the boss is more stronger and more physical. I really like that dungeon, and in fact, I actually liked all the dungeons in the Amala Temple. Like, I really do think this game's dungeon designs are really well done. There was one dungeon I didn't like, but we'll talk about that later. And you know the one I'm talking about. And to go back onto the difficulty, you might be saying to yourself about me and saying, the truest of the wisest of gamers. But the bosses are where the game becomes a real challenge. And that's a real depends. You see, I really haven't even gotten into my biggest problem with the game as a whole, and partially just the franchise as a whole. Basically, the series is RNG hell. You see, the game isn't really designed well or balanced well with the RNG. For example, bosses are not trying to win. I mean, they will try to, it's just, I don't know how to explain it. The game will just weirdly randomly decide what move they will use. That creates a problem of where you can't really plan around the boss. Basically, you're just kind of like hoping that something particularly happens with no real plan. Though there is a small benefit of making players unsure of what to do next and make them plan a risk versus reward, which it's still there, it's just that, again, it's so RNG that I am unsure about literally every move the enemy's going to make. Like, I remember so many bosses I was fighting against constantly hitting the one that couldn't be hit by their weakness. And it's just like, what? Some of these bosses are rock dumb. And this guy was just pathetic, and he was a fiend. Yeah, let's quickly explain him. See, after a while, you're sent to the Amala network. Demon Internet, that's the best way to put it. After finishing it, you meet up with Lucifer. Yeah, we're just spoiling that now. We'll get into that later. Again, there's so much shit I want to talk about. Anyway, he basically gives you a menorah and says, hey, this will give you power. But be careful, you gotta fight the other fiends in order to gain more power. And Dante. Yeah, Dante from the Devil May Cry series is in this game, for some reason. I'm not sure what led them to do this, but I'm still happy. Even if it's a DMC2 design, but whatever. So how is Dante involved with all this? Well, he was called up by Lucifer. Wait, what? Okay, this is the part that always boggles my mind, like, how come nobody just straight up just says, yeah, Dante just knows who Lucifer is? That is just, like, so weird to me, because, like, I'm pretty sure Dante would try to kill Lucifer because he's Lucifer. I don't need to say much. Dante is after the demi-thing for reasons that are just not really elaborated on well enough, but it doesn't really matter. My guess is that this is just an alternate version of Dante with a very more loose morals, because again, I'm pretty sure he would never go along with this plan, ever. It's just weird as all. Though weirdly enough, you have to pay for him in order to get him, because the base game will have Rido instead, but he's DLC. Though speaking of Rido, we should get his games ported, for fuck's sake. They were good games. Also, the Digital Devil Saga games. Just port them! For God's sake, they were good. They were like the best SMT games ever. And I will debate it. Yeah, in any case, let's go back to the Fiend fights. The feats were actually pretty easy. Like, I beat the trumpeter on my first go around, even though I had no idea of his mechanics. Seriously, he is super easy. In fact, most of the bosses were pretty easy, again, once you know their weakness or strengths. You basically won, and it's just a matter of time as long as your team is well built. Which, for the most part, you'll probably be fine with even a subpar team, again, as long as you're not basically brain dead stupid. So, okay, I also forgot to talk about something here, and I don't know why I forgot. Maybe it's just because it went over my head and I sorta talked about it, but I didn't really talk about it. Let me explain. So, remember when I talked about the elemental weakness system? Well, this system's a little weird because of you, the player. See, the main character in a lot of the older SMT games in general don't usually get abilities to help them out like using magic. Which is very weird because magic is very useful overall in this series. Like, it is super useful and not using it is weird. Well, except in this game, but you get my point. That's because of the Magatama system. Basically, you can switch out Magatamas at any time in order to gain new abilities when you level up. These abilities can vary depending on the Magatama you have, and the later ones you find are just overall better. And this just allows you to vary up your build a bit, like maybe have a more healing-centric, or maybe more physical-centric, which a lot of players do, and I never do that because fuck that, I ain't gonna lose health for just attacking. But in any case, it's still good that the option is there for players, and I really do appreciate the system, even though I wish the game gave you more singular attack abilities. Because for some strange reason, all of the magical abilities are multi-hitting random. I'm not sure why. It's not bad as it can multi-hit foes, I'm just more concerned and confused. And that's pretty much the combat. It's pretty good, and I would say that the series would try to figure out their own version of the test turn system for the other games. Some failures, some good ideas, some just basically just wholesale just use that game again, but we'll talk about that some other day. And now we must talk about the story and where my big complaint about the game comes in. And that's mostly because I want to say something controversial. This game's story is kind of bad in general. Yeah, I said it. Okay, honestly, I'm being a bit hyperbolic, but in full honesty here, I don't really care for the story of Nocturne. I honestly put that to be by and large because of the characters. The characters are very unlikable, or downright just hateable. Which, I mean, like, that also can be a point, but we're not getting into that. For the most part, the characters are flat, and you really don't learn anything truly that much about them. I mean, you learn some things, but not really enough to make a complete picture of that person. The only thing you can really go on is what you're being shown, and it's not much. Like, what leads them to believe that their reason is the right one? Like, why would Chiaki believe in the reason of chaos? Which, to actually side note, it's something weird because a lot of people don't understand why the angels are siding with Chiaki. I kind of thought it was obvious, but you know what? We'll get into that. And of course, you can read or watch the CD drama or the book. Yeah, there's a book. I didn't actually realize it until I was looking up stuff for the video because I wanted to learn about the CD drama. I had to check online and there is no official English translation of the book, sadly, but it's kind of like a lot of SMT stuff, not a lot of it's translated. But I feel like I shouldn't have to go out of my way just to learn simple things about the character. I don't let 13 do it, why the hell would I let it here? In fact, some videos I can't remember, I'll put them on screen right now so you can know which ones I'm talking about, kinda infer that SMT does this more because it allows the characters to be like, this is the reason I'm following, and doesn't try to dilute it because of the character. which I can understand because sometimes a character can pollute an idea so much that we kind of don't actively look at it. However, I think the opposite is true as well. Someone can be so bad that we will outright ignore and actually take away none of their points because we genuinely don't like them. I mean, like, for example, if Lucifer came up to you and said, hey, I want to bring about world peace, you want to help? You would immediately go, no! Because, you know, he's Lucifer! He's going to fucking lie to you to get what he really wants! Why would you ever take any idea from him with legitimacy if you know there's an underlying idea that he actually wants? Which I know is ironic because the game also has Lucifer. You get the point! How you present an idea is very important, and the game has a weird issue of doing so. In fact, I argue the game has a weird way of showing why everyone's reason is really dumb. In fact, let's actually go over all the endings, since we might as well. But before that, we need to explain the conception a little more. Earlier, I mentioned it's how the world is reborn. Well, essentially, before the world is reborn, it must have a reason or a major ideology behind it. However, demons are not allowed to actually make their own reasons. It's why you're prevented from making one. Well, sort of. We'll get into that. However, even before that, you need to also present enough Magatsui, which is a thing in the universe of SMT Nocturne, which basically is the substance that sustains a universe, which is just the energy of the feelings and emotions people have, which... Oh my god, this is just Relic! Oh god. Okay, like, side note for a moment, because I want to mention this. Okay, in DC Comics, during the New 52, there was this character called Relic, and if you've seen Linkar's video about him, you know what I'm talking about. But in any case, he's basically the survivor of the old universe, which basically died because people had way too many emotions. Well, sort of, because the universe emotions ran out. I don't know how that works, but whatever. I don't know why they thought this was a good idea, but I don't really get it to begin with, but... But why do they need the Magatsui to begin with? For you see, humans are then to present that Magatsui to a godlike being to become a sponsor for their reason. Because you're not the only one out there who wants their reason out there too. So you need some muscle to make sure nobody gets in your way. So what are their reasons? Well, let's get into that now. Let's begin with Hikawa, since he's a bit weird. By and large, he was actually a part of the Ring of Gaia. But after a while, he kind of realized, yeah, their philosophies were fundamentally different. For non-SMT fans, the Ring of Gaia is a notorious chaos-aligned group in the SMT series, just so we're clear. Basically, he wanted a world of stillness. Basically, he wants humanity to kind of just stop being people and kind of like be nature, man. I'm not sure how that works exactly. In fact, if anything about all of these endings are a bit confusing because they're not very clear-cut. Which is very weird because SMT is usually very clear-cut about most of its endings, but we'll talk about that later. If I had to simplify Hikawa's belief, it's basically a world of law without... And I say that mostly because law by its very nature cares about order above all else, and does not like the individual. So it will pretty much kill all individuals to support the whole of the universe. That's just how it works. However, if you remember earlier, Chiaki's side has all the law-aligned demons. What's with that? Well, I think it's mostly because they see Hikawa's version is unable to kind of easily blend in their version. So they decided to go with Chiaki, who's basically chaos. Which is weird because this game is very much chaos aligned, though we'll talk about that later. Chiaki's basically the strong deserve to rule, all that whatnot. So if I had to ask why the law demons were with her, basically they decide to say, well, is the strongest person around, so once he comes back, he'll just rule everything. That's my guess. Plus, law-aligned demons usually like a structure. As long as there is a sort of order to it all, they don't really care how it's done. Well, what about Isamu? Isamu's a kind of weird one. He's kind of a dark-aligned neutral character. I'm not gonna bring up light and dark, it's a whole other thing that is a part of the SMT stuff, but nobody really cares about it all that much. In fact, I think some people should actually go into depth about it, because I'm just not the person qualified to talk about it. Essentially, it's a very isolationalist sort of mindset. Essentially believes that people are inherently only care about themselves, so he basically said everyone should get their own world, be alone, because that's all you care about and that's what everyone else cares about. These are the 3 reasons you are given, or at least shown off very early on. However, the game has 3 other reasons that are very interesting and really do deserve to be talked about way more than the normal endings, or these 3 endings I just talked about, mostly because they're very dull. They lack anything to make them really meaningful or really all that interesting than any other version of these. Well, except Isamu, whose neutral ending is kinda interesting by its very nature, since it's very different than most other neutral endings, but they all suffer from a little contradiction about them that prevents them from just working. Let's work backwards and start with Chiaki. A world of chaos is never going to work. I'm sorry, it just doesn't. Chaos just basically is, for the most part, the strong rule while the weak suffer. There is no argument. I mean, hell, Chiaki only got lucky getting the strength she got. She didn't really earn any of the strength she got throughout the entire game. She got lucky. In fact, she keeps mentioning fate. I again say this is a problem where the game doesn't really explain this character's backstory, which, if you don't know, it's a little more interesting and kind of elaborates on more why she would likely have this belief, but again, I shouldn't have to look outside of the game just to figure out what the hell you're trying to do. But in any case, Chaos just doesn't have anything really to offer other than you be on top. Really, who's on top doesn't really matter because it can be easily changed at any time, causing more chaos, preventing people from actually doing anything, and it just being a constant death battle between people just to do something basic. Isamu's ending is a little weirder, because again, like I stated, neutral doesn't usually go this route, and it going this route actually makes it a little more interesting. However, it contradicts itself a lot throughout the game. Throughout the entire game, you have to help Isamu do stuff. And I mean, like, at one point after you defeat the boss, and he's like, you guys didn't help me at all. I'm gonna just do my own thing. You're worthless to me. He still requires you to help him in order to do anything. Hell, he still has to call up other demons just to fuse with him in order to gain the strength he needs in order to summon up his god. Because again, he can't do it alone. Hikawa just basically will just kill humanity as it is, solely because it will take everything humanity is and just remove it. Because what else can it do but that? So by the end of it all of these endings just became nonsense to me, and I just ignore them for the other endings, which are far more interesting and at least have some arguments to them. Let's actually talk about the one ending that actually really interests me, mostly because it's the odd man out of all endings. I'm essentially talking about the demon ending. Essentially, the ending just precludes the idea that, yeah, basically fuck everyone, and I mean everyone. Basically, you kill Akatsuchi and prevent the cycle of reincarnation and rebirth from happening. Basically, shutting off the universe. I find this ending to be the most interesting because only one other ending in the entire series, as far as my memory goes, if I am forgetting one, do tell me because I haven't played the Devil Survivor games yet. I know, I am a monster. My point is that being, it's an ending that basically said, fuck everyone, taking the world with me, which is a very nihilistic ending in general. And of course I know about the true demon ending. Ironically, it's a hopeful ending, but it's also a sad ending, but we'll talk about that in a moment. I also want to mention an ending I think the game could have had, but it's just something very interesting we don't really talk about. So, okay, throughout the game you will also meet a type of being in the game called mannequins. Basically, they're the leftover human emotions of people that slowly over time became their own being. They're pretty much human-like, but are prevented from being able to, well, have a reason. Why, I'm not sure, because what particularly prevents them from having a reason? I mean, like, for characters like Futomimi and Sakahagi, they're able to collect Magatsui to do whatever they want. So what particularly prevents them from forming a reason? I kinda have an answer, but I'll talk about it later because it ties into a lot of other points I want to talk about, which leads me into the point of the reason why I even made this review to begin with. I wanted to talk about some weird conceptions about the series we have, and maybe try to correct them or at least say something about them, because overall we have a problem and I think we need to address them. Even if my arguments aren't that great, I'm apologizing right now because I've been trying to figure out what I'm trying to say here for like the last few days, and it's just, I have an idea and it's just not coming out right. So I just decided to kind of do this more freeform. It's why a lot of it sounds a little more kind of disconnected a bit at times. I apologize. So let's kind of deal with this thing I want to talk about. 3 foundational things I kind of want to talk about that I think we need to kind of address. So let's actually get into the first one, which I think a lot of people really genuinely really need to just get over and just accept that this is just a series. That being, you guys do know the neutral ending is like considered best ending in all the games for the most part. Besides those bad neutral endings, which, you know what I mean? I say all that because Law and Chaos are just bad endings in general, because they just generally kill humanity as a whole. And this ties into another thing we kind of need to address, but we'll talk about that more later because it's more tied into a lot of other things and another misconception, which is just, ugh. And we also need to address now the misconception of what the neutral ending really entails. Notice how I said earlier about how usually the SMT endings are usually very clear-cut about what happens next? And by usually, I usually just mean Law and Chaos, because usually they have a particular end point. They have no other point than those end points. And I mean, like, the game never treats any of these ideologies with any real respect. Like, they say they have some good points and actually do point out problems, but they suffer from so many problems that they are untenable. Like, I literally cannot understand why some people think any of these ideologies have any merit to them. And hell, I'll even say this, neutral isn't all that great of an option either, but the game makes no delusion that it is. For the most part, neutral is treated as the ending where, yeah, you're trying to find a balance between the two extremes, because there are points for both sides. Society can't be run by individuals or a group. It needs to be finding a middle so that both sides can actually coexist. And it makes no delusion that it's going to be simple. Usually all the other alignment answers usually just say, here is the simple answer, here's what we gotta do to fix the problem. Rather than actually give any real substance to the issue, it just says, we just gotta do something different. Rather than actually figuring out the problem is something greater and needs to be addressed. In fact, the series makes it a point that this can all happen again, but that's not the point. The point is to keep trying. Find a better answer. Because these two extremes aren't going to help anyone. And by and large, that's my biggest problem with a lot of people talking about endings. They treat all the endings equally as though they're all equally valid when one of them is genocidal to an extreme. Which one, I'll let you decide. Trick question, it's both. And I just want to be clear, I don't hate anyone who likes the other endings. That's you, man. I just don't want you to pretend that the series is being biased against them, when the series has always been biased against them. It's just that you weren't paying attention. Well, I got that out of my chest. Let's actually talk about the other one that's more interesting in general, mostly because I find it interesting. Well, in any case, well, it ties into the other point, but we'll get into. That being, law does not equal, and no, is not the ultimate villain of the series. Okay, this ties into another thing per se, but it's a lot of complicated stuff. Okay, so some people don't like the interpretation of in the game. Why? I think it's just a Western thing, but let's deal with it now. I think it's important to understand that a lot of Japanese people do not treat with any kind of like reverence because, you know, it's not a religion they care about all that much. I mean, like, they use its iconography, but that's pretty much it. Like, the best way I could put it to someone is like, you know how people we treat like how the Greek mythology stuff? Think like that, except you just replace it with Christianity. Think like that, and it makes a whole lot more sense. And some people do have a problem with its depiction. I kinda do too. But the depiction itself is not entirely inaccurate. I mean, like, have you ever actually read the Bible? It's a kind of weird book in general. I mean, like, this is an actual story in there, by the way. So, okay, there was this bald guy. He was really bald. Some kids laughed at him. So he called up God and said, "Hey, God, can you punish these kids?" And then God sent a bunch of bears to kill the kids. Like, that's not even a joke. That actually happened. I'm just saying, he ain't great all the time. All I'm saying is, it's a bit disingenuous when you people do that and not understand the point. It's just how he is. He is just a version we are seeing. Because I'm trying to remember, didn't Devil Survivor have a good version of him? It's just that you need to understand, this is just how he normally is in regards to how we understand his text. And if we want to be intellectually honest, that's just how he is. It is not the entirety of this character, but it is not only that part, if you catch my drift. But also we need to talk about something else too, and it's a little more complicated because of just how much the series does not try to explain this at all. However, there was something really cool and I really want to reference it. In fact, this whole discussion is kind of based on a bunch of things. Those 4 videos actually start this video up because I wanted to talk about the endings. Then in article / blog, I'm not sure what to call it. Yeah, just a blog. Anyway, was talking about debunking some myths in the series, and I kind of wanted to just emphasize some of those points because some of those points are really well done and well handled, and I really wanted to address some. And actually, one of them is about the Great Will. Let's actually talk about the Great Will for a moment and how it's strange. Okay, for those who don't know, the Great Will in the series is a sort of unclear being. It's basically a godlike entity, but it's also God. I'm not sure how that works, but hear me out. One interpretation I've heard is that the Great Will is just a nebulous thing that is supposed to allow people to insert their own religious beliefs, so that way they can interpret, hey, this is just how this person is. It's mysterious ways, man. I actually thought that was really interesting, and I don't know what to say else other than, yeah, that's actually interesting, because the Great Will in the series is always neutral at best. By that I mean, it doesn't really do anything to really oppose you, but it doesn't really do anything against you. And I mean, like, the only time I've ever seen it actually do something that goes out of its way to say, fuck you, is to Hijiri, which, by the way, Hijiri is not Ayla. There's no evidence for it. Like, I personally still believe it because it's interesting and allows for a lot of interesting dynamics. And like, well, when I say I believe, I'm not against it, but I'm not for it because it doesn't really remove anything and actually adds depth. But if we take it away, it doesn't remove anything either. You know what I mean? I'm getting off topic. The point of the Great Will is that it's just how it is. A better explanation for it is like, okay, you ever seen Berserk? Okay, in that show, there's something called the Heart of Evil or the Idea of Evil, depending on the translation. Essentially, it is created by humanity to explain the world. Essentially, it will always come up and do something just to explain the universe, and just does whatever. Whether or not that's opposed to humanity is a whole other thing. But, you know what I mean.
If you're wondering why I explained it now, because, well, I kind of want to bring up another thing, and like, this point is actually something I really wanted to ask people, and I actually made a Reddit post about it. I thought it would be interesting. The question was, is Lucifer a part of the Great Will? I asked this because he seems to know more than most people should really ever know about the Great Will. I mean, by his very nature, he's usually opposed to whatever a plan is. He will always go against it and try to do his own thing. This has always been a constant for him in literally most games. However, he never gets beyond that. He will never change. So my idea is, well, if he is a part of the Great Will, why isn't Lucifer? There was one really cool answer, which was like, he does know he is, but he refuses to ever acknowledge it because it would be a denial to everything he is. Which I find super fascinating. Like, the being made to counter the Great Will is a part of the Great Will. But you might be asking, why would the Great Will need any reason to counter itself? Well, it's kind of hard to kind of think for yourself if you have only yourself. So, it's kind of like what happens with all the time. Basically, he creates some other version of himself, but it's uncontrollable because it is both separate from it and is connected to its own self. I know that sounds weird, but that's the best way to put it. But I've been going on long enough. Let's actually talk about the endings, the other two endings, the last two. The Freedom and the True Demon ending. The True Demon ending is kind of like one of the boring endings, like, I actually tried to get that ending. It's quite dull. The Amala Network, it's just the longest boring dungeon in the entire game. Like, bar none, it is just dull. Has some cool gimmicks to it, but is very dull. In any case, let's explain it. In that ending, after collecting all of the menorahs, you will become a full-fledged demon, essentially tossing away your humanity in order to destroy the system. Lucifer praises you for doing so, which I'm not sure why anyone thinks this ending is good, because, you know, it's also Lucifer, which I know I just went through that last step, but it's also Lucifer. I don't know why people would ever agree with him on literally anything, but Anyway, after destroying the Kagatsuchi and the world itself, you'll basically go out to try to fight and try to do that, which some people believe lead into SMT5, but not particularly. In fact, that game kind of says it didn't happen and it kind of got stopped, but another one happened, which is like, it's weird. But I really don't like that ending because, again, in the series all about trying to find reason and hope and stuff, it's the ending that says, there is no hope, destroy everything. There's nothing really to fight for other than destroy. That's pretty much the ending in a nutshell. There is no freedom. You lose everything. There is nothing to be gained other than destruction. Now we need to talk about the freedom ending. The freedom ending basically asserts that, yeah, this can happen again, but we're gonna try to make the world a better place. That's all there is to it. Find our own reason. Find happiness in that. And like, I don't know why, but this ending really just hits me right here. In the pancreas. Also in my heart, but I don't know, I think it's been dead for a while. I might need to go to a doctor. Anyway, the ending really is just about, yeah, you don't know what's gonna come next, but you'll wait. You'll figure out it. You'll just try to live. And that ending is way more hopeful than literally any of the other endings, because, yeah, the world's messed up, but you gotta keep trying. Like, what else is there to do but to keep trying to find a world to make it better? I really don't have much else to say than, at the end of the day, SMT Nocturne is a good experience overall, but is hampered from its ability to do much else. Gameplay-wise, it's good and can be serviceable as long as you come in very blind and with no real knowledge of the game. The music. Oh, I haven't actually talked about the music. Fuck. God damn it. Like, if you need me to tell you the music is good,
I don't know what I can do to help you. You might need help. The game looks great, even with the HD remaster kind of doing some weird stuff with it, but it still looks good. Hell, even playing the original's still good. It's just, I don't know, I feel left empty by the experience in the end sometimes. And it's fine. I just don't want to ever experience it again. And this time, I actually hate that feeling. I really wanted to like this game, but it just has too many problems to prevent me from actually, enjoying it.